Good evening. Welcome to this evening's edition of the Richard Urban Show. I am your host, Richard Urban, coming to you from historic Harpers Ferry, West Virginia. We bring you news and views from God's point of view. This special election edition, brought to you today, November 4th, 2020, is entitled Who Can Be Trusted on Voting Integrity, President Trump or Joe Biden? Well, right now, we know that there are several states such as Georgia, Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, Nevada, North Carolina, that and Pennsylvania that have not been clearly called for the election. Although some the news outlets are claiming like Michigan and Wisconsin, but nonetheless, and all the more, we see that there's a trend where, as the voting drags on, suddenly, or not so suddenly, there are, President Trump is ahead, and the next thing you know, then there are a lot of ballots counted, and then suddenly President Trump is behind, and he's way ahead in Pennsylvania. So the begs the question: is something going on, and can we trust generally President Trump, or can we trust generally Mr. Biden, and can we trust the integrity of the voting process? So let's look at this more closely. I'm going to look at a few articles, and we're going to come more clearly to a conclusion on this. Here we see an article from Fox News. This is from May 15th. Nevada's vote by mail primary stirs fraud concerns as unclaimed ballots pile up. Something stinks here. So the gist of this story here is that there were thousands of ballots sent out in Nevada, which by the way is a contested state, and this is about the primary, but they were sent out to every registered voter. And in fact, they used to only send them out to voters that had voted in recent elections, but now the Democrat-dominated Clark County Commission here is pushing or has said that they needed to mail them out to every voter. So what would happen is, as we see in a picture here, many ballots went, tens of thousands, to people who had moved, perhaps they had died. Like here's a bunch of ballots on the sidewalk. Or as you know, if you live in an apartment building, when they deliver a bunch of mail that goes to everybody, it often ends up like on top of the mailboxes or wherever, and anybody could grab these ballots and return them. So how is this even remotely secure? So who would be that's pushing this the most? Mostly Democrats, although some Republicans were also pushing, to have mail-in voting, where anybody can request an absentee ballot is one method, or even more so in states like Oregon, Washington, and Nevada here, they mail ballots to everyone. And that even an elementary school student could figure out that is rife for fraud and for ballot harvesting. People can collect ballots that aren't used. They could send them back, or they could get the person to fill it out and sign it, under nefarious circumstances. And these things have been happening. In fact, in Orange County, California, which was once a Republican stronghold, after the law was changed there so that anyone could send back a ballot, which happened in 2018. I'm sorry, anyone could get how do you say, a mail-in ballot or absentee ballot. Then, and also, they can send them in days and weeks after the election. Then many ballots came in after the election or were counted after election, even weeks after election in California, and suddenly these seats that were held by Republicans were lost. Wow, go figure. Here, Democrats are vowing to continue legal action to overturn the state's ban on ballot harvesting. Republicans are concerned about how the issue will affect the outcome of November's presidential election in a key battleground state. Well, and even in more than one key state. So the question is, why would Democrats want rules relaxed for voting? Who does this benefit? Are there any conflicts of interest, in promoting that? And in fact, in California, ballot harvesting is legal. So in Orange County, people would bring in a stack of 100 or 200 ballots at a time. Where did these ballots come from? Who knows? Maybe went around the neighborhood and asked people to fill it out, or the people said, hey, you fill it out, or who knows the circumstances. This is crazy. Here we find in this article the same problem. A prominent Democratic lawyer who represented Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign is threatening to sue the state of Nevada unless it immediately suspends prosecutions for ballot harvesting before the June 9th primary. So who would that benefit? Why would Democrats want that? Because they want a ballot harvest. Duh. Does it take a rocket scientist to figure that out? As I already said, who is more trustworthy, President Trump or Joe Biden? So why would Biden and his team and the Democrats specifically be pushing all these mail-in ballots? Why was there such a push? And this was supposedly because of the coronavirus also. But in many places, like in Pennsylvania, already they had changed the law before the coronavirus came up in 2019 to allow mail-in ballots. Also in 2018, for any reason, people can mail in their ballot. No excuse needed, like you couldn't get to the polls. Wow, what a coincidence. Michigan was won by a slim margin, and now it's in question. Oh, wow, that's coincidental. Also Nevada, vote by mail. North Carolina, anyone can request a how do you say, ballot by mail or absentee ballot. So we see a huge issue with this, whole system. This chart here shows when ballots can be turned in by state. It says, look at this, in California until November 20th. Crazy. Alaska 13th of the month. And there's other places that can be returned in way after the election, and that was contested in Pennsylvania. Here it says it was supposed to be, November 6th, and that's contested. So and in Washington State, I think is the longest. They do all mail-in voting, November 23rd. So what can happen in this interim period? Well, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to think that ballots that have been harvested or conjured up in that way, can be returned late or are counted, how do you say, that there's a lot of opportunity for fraud. This article explains that there are 28 million mail-in ballots went missing in the last 4 elections. So they were mailed out but unaccounted for. They couldn't attract them. What happened to them? Where are they? And in fact, studies have suggested in the past that definitely there is more chance of fraud, and actual cases of fraud and ballot harvesting have come up in a number of locations. A study from the MIT, a Center for Politics, was explaining that it would actually be better to have people voting in person. That would be Caltech MIT Voting Technology Project. Recommended restrict or abolish on-demand absentee voting in favor of in-person early voting. So as we look at this ongoing conflict, President Trump is absolutely right to say that in his mind he won the election. That is right. He did. That is not a false statement. And he's right to challenge these extremely dubious and questionable counting of votes. And I challenge anyone who thinks this is a wonderful process to, explain to me or anybody else how having thousands and millions of ballots floating around unaccounted for helps the integrity of the voting process. It does not. And in fact, who can we trust on this issue? And does this issue help people fulfill their own responsibility? Obviously, it's disenfranchising people through ballot harvesting and people going around saying, hey, let me have your ballot, or worse yet, filling out the ballot themselves, or worse yet, other kinds of fraud that could be easily committed by people picking up stacks of ballots or ballots that are lying around on the ground or in apartment buildings or anywhere else, or ballot harvesting. So this is a completely fraudulent process. People should have to vote in person unless there's some specific reason for them to request an absentee ballot, as has been traditionally done, like they could not get to the poll. And also, they should be able to have to verify their identity. Here in West Virginia, they have identity law now. You have to prove who you are. In places like DC, when I was living there, you just walk in, you just sign your name. Shoot, somebody could probably sign my name now to say they're Richard Urban. I mean, I don't know if they probably, hopefully they've cleaned me off the voter roll, but who knows? They're, that probably doesn't immediately happen, since I am registered here in West Virginia. What if someone else went in there, and said they're Richard Urban? Nothing will prevent them. You don't even have to show any identification. That's insane. So who do these things benefit, and who can we trust about this? Can we trust Joe Biden, the man who brings you the whole corruption, who doesn't know anything about the tens of millions that he gets from Mr. Hunter Biden, apparently, doesn't know anything about who the big guy is, doesn't know anything about his son's business dealings, who did admit that he threatened to withhold aid to Ukraine, if they didn't fire the prosecutor looking into his son's business. Give me a break. Who believes this man? So we cannot trust anything that he does. And can we trust in general the Democrats? It's not only Democrats. There is corruption all around. But this whole idea of mail-in voting and unlimited absentee ballots to whoever wants them, and even worse, just mailing the ballots out and tens of thousands of ballots unaccounted for. So President Trump is absolutely 100% right to challenge this. And I predict and believe and know that in the end he will be vindicated. And he will win this election fair and square. But the word here is fair and square, not hook and crook, which would be the appropriate words for Mr. Biden, hook and crook. So let's keep that in mind as we see this ongoing process. And also, I want to call out the just incredibly blatant bias of the mainstream media. I was watching on CBS last night for a few minutes. Mostly I watch on One America News Network, which is a good station, probably the only decent one, on the television side or whatever, video side, of the different kind of network type news. And it's not really network news. But anyway, so biased, saying the president that he's wrong and that how wonderful they are and that how, just calling states like when Florida was like 99.999% counted, they don't say it's for Trump. But Arizona, they say it's for Biden. When they're still counting the votes now, and it may well go for President Trump. What the heck? And then Virginia, they said it was for President Trump early on. Then they took it off, and ultimately it did go to
Joe Biden.
But still, it's so blatantly biased. And if you can't see that, you're not seeing clearly. You're not seeing clearly what's going on. You need to step back and take a look at what's going on and who's promoting, what is on God's side. That means something that's good, and who's thinking of other people, and who's promoting themselves and the self-interest, And if you haven't looked into the whole Hunter Biden scandal, I'd like you to justify and look into that and justify why that's okay for your man, Mr. Biden. It's not okay. And then look into the whole issue of why it's okay to have all these different ballots floating around. And even in California, they've legalized ballot harvesting. That's like legalizing cheating on voting. What the heck? And then, as I just read, in Nevada, which is now a contested state, they're basically also trying to legalize the same things. Ballot harvesting. What the heck? Who does that benefit? Disenfranchised voters? And by the way, what is a disenfranchised voter anyway? It means they can't vote. Somebody came, like and threatened them not to vote. No, it means they didn't go and vote. Like in D.C. and many times, East River, 75% of people didn't vote. Is that because somebody threatened them? Is that because they couldn't get to the polls? No, they just didn't vote. So would it be easy for somebody if everybody's mailed a ballot, or there are many mail-in ballots to go around and ballot harvest? Sure. So does that enfranchise those voters who never bothered to vote? Not at all, because that person could fill out the ballot anyway, or very likely will just fill it out whatever way they suggest filling it out, obviously for their wondrous candidate like Mr. Biden. That doesn't enfranchise anybody. Actually voting, actually learning about the issues, actually being civic, actually taking responsibility, that enfranchises people. So this is not going to succeed, Mr. Biden. Your heist here is not going to work. It's not going to work this time. You know what? It's not going to work. I'm predicting it right now. You will be defeated in the end. You are not on the side of good. You're on the wrong side. You're on the side of evil. All your dealings with Hunter Biden, all your crap like that. It's wrong. It's evil. All those conflicts of interest, all your lying. It will not succeed, and we will not put up with it. So you go, President Trump. You do your thing. I'm 100% behind you, and you prevail in the courts. And for the legal counting, yes, count votes that are legal and proper. And let's get rid of this whole mail-in and ballot harvesting system, which is completely rife for fraud. That doesn't benefit anybody who's honest and has integrity. So, do be blessed. Do hang in there as we come to the conclusion of this election successfully for Donald J. Trump. So I thank you for listening. I am your host, Rich Urban, coming to historic Harper's Ferry, November 4th, 2020, 11:17 p.m. Eastern Time. Do tune in next time, and do be blessed.